Sorry, I just started the recording. So we'll go over the cards passage, and I'm just going to go quickly over what each paragraph, what I wrote down for the summary, and then we'll go over the answers. Um, so paragraph one was talking about how the behavior and culture, they thought it was due to genetics, and those people were called the sociobiologists. And then paragraph two said this is not a new concept, it dates back to the 15 and 60s. Um, and then paragraph three introduced a new concept with Stephen Pinker saying that an example saying like parents don't have any don't have any impact on the children, which is kind of too far according to the author. This stretch is too far. And then paragraph four, we get more of the author's opinion and also another example through anthropology. And this was also important because as we read the questions, we saw how behavior gets excused by sociobiologists, and they say that it's our genetic makeup. And then paragraph five, we also had a question on Edward Wilson, so that's the paragraph to go back to. And then paragraph six, the author says it's not just the genes, and he gives some more examples about can genes explain the work of Aristotle or Shakespeare, and that's kind of what his opinion is. Is there any questions on the passage before we move on to the answers? All good. Okay. Okay, question one. What did you guys think of this?
Initially, I got this one wrong. I picked the more extreme answer, basically.
Okay. Yeah, so in paragraph four, this is talking about the anthropology one. It strongly implies what? So going through the answer choices, we want to pick something based on what the example was saying and what the author was thinking as well. And remember, the main point was like bad behaviors get excused as genetic makeup. So C is the best answer because it mentioned that the genes that excuse the bad behavior and that those are the inevitable products of our genetic makeup. So that's what it implies that we don't need to change the behavior that is genetically undetermined. Does that make sense? Was D the answer you chose before?
Yeah, I chose D basically, but I
Mhm.
understand now why it's C.
Okay. Yeah, so whenever you see also words like any and not, just be wary of like super extreme choices like that. Okay, question two. What did you guys think of this?
I don't even remember what I picked for this one, but I'm like reading it over again.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. So they're saying like if we have two parents who are musicians and the children are musicians, how can they make sure that their third child is also going to be a musician? And what would the author recommend? So basically, the author was saying that the genes are not what determine the culture. So he's actually going to have to um, be there in the culture to experience the music. It's not just genetics. So you can't assume that since the parents were musicians, that the child is going to become a musician as well, because the author says that culture is not genetically determined. Question three. What did you guys think of this question? Okay, I'm seeing some Bs. So sociobiologists, what do they think? They said that the culture is genetically determined, right? So we're trying to look with something with culture. So A doesn't really describe culture being tall. Family members isn't also culture. So art is culture, and so that can be one of the choices. And D is also not addressing culture. So you want to be careful about having that choice there. So if culture is genetically determined, it would make sense that the artists are related to each other because then um, it would make sense if all the great artists, which is culture, and if he's saying that is genetically determined, that they would be related. So you want to go with the main. So it's going with two things that you have to have culture and genetics. So C has both. So the best artists would be related to each other. So that's saying culture is genetically determined. That's literally what C is saying. So that's why it would be correct because that's what sociobiologists think. Does that make sense? Okay. Question 4. So what would the author agree with? Yep. So he was being wary about saying that culture is all genetic. So, but also with C, you want to be careful because it does mention that, but it doesn't say one is more important than the other. So you want to stick with the best choice according to the paragraph and what the author thinks. So the author would say that you have to definitely be careful about saying something like that culture is all genetic. Okay, question 5. What do you guys think about question 5?
I'm thinking because Wilson was the like sociobiologist that like encouraged the genetic link, then like maybe A.
Okay. Yeah, just be careful because A is mentioning only. And he was if he's the father of sociobiologists, you want to be careful about having both culture and genetics, right? So it would make sense because B is looking at the connection with the culture, though. So it's having that the novels are related to the readers. So that's making that connection between the culture if all the novels and readers have connections between them. Does that make sense? Whereas A um, has a genetic component, but is only saying that only genes should be focused on instead of the culture. So you want to look at something with both, right? So be careful because sociobiologists have both the genetic component and the culture. So you want to have your answer choices that look at both, not just one portion of it. Okay, what about 6? This is kind of tricky, but what do you guys think this analogy is related best to? Hannah, do you want to explain how you got A?
Yeah, so because the author doesn't like believe that DNA plays like a big part in culture, like a musical remix technically like that's like okay, so like the songs and samples could be like the DNA and the genes, but technically the musical remix doesn't have to like be determined by that. So like it could be better. I don't know. Like I just
Mhm.
like was eliminating like the other ones basically.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of how I did that as well. So, genes and DNA don't determine the culture, and that's kind of what A is suggesting, whereas B contradicts that, and C and D weren't related. So, I guess the best answer would be A. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the biology passage? Okay, Pranava's going to take over now.
So just give me 1 second, please. You guys can see my screen? Yeah.
Yep, we see it.
Thanks, Em. So I'm going to go through the passage as an overview, like Sim did. So the first paragraph is describing what type of protein Wnt is, and then it's describing palmitylation, which is a post-translational modification, and then describing what exactly that is. And then it's describing the receptor for this glycoprotein, which is Wnt-less. Or sorry, that's not the receptor, that's the carrier protein, which takes it out of the cell. And then it's talking about the other potential paths that it can take once Wnt is out of the cell. So it's either once secreted, it can act on target cells through this receptor, which is going to go through the GPCR pathway. And then the second paragraph is talking about its potential functions, and then the Wnt pathway. And then paragraph 3 is going to continue talking about the pathway, and then going to reference the figure on the right, which shows what the pathway does when there is Wnt present, and then what the pathway does when Wnt is absent. So paragraph 4 then is talking about describing that figure and the difference between the pathway and the absence and presence of Wnt. Was that okay for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then, so this question asks, which of the most following occurs prior to the binding of Wnt to the carrier protein Wnt-less? Which answer choice did you guys pick for this?
At first I picked the Golgi, but then like last minute I changed it to the nuclear membrane. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what were you, I don't know if do you have the passage pulled up? You can tell me like which paragraph you're looking at?
Yeah. So basically like I just thought that because like it was like bonded to like the fatty acid that it like now it could because it's like non-polar it can diffuse through the nuclear membrane, but I think I was just like overthinking it.
Yeah, so we're not actually told if it's even coming from the nucleus, and it's probably not because proteins are translated in the cytoplasm, right? So most likely what's happening is that it's just going from the cytoplasm, and it's when it's leaving the cell, it's going through the cell membrane. So I don't think it's starting off in the nucleus.
Okay.
So really what we're looking at is those first two sentences of the first paragraph where it's describing palmitylation. And then the passage tells you that when the Wnt is palmitylated, then it can bind to Wnt-less. So what you can do is just go to the third sentence of the first paragraph where it's talking about Wnt-less, right? And then look right before it to see what's happening. And what's happening is that palmitylation. So what you do is recognize that this is a type of post-translational modification. And then you have to know that post-translational modifications happen in the Golgi apparatus. Does that make sense? So like it says that only palmitylated Wnt can bind to Wnt-less, right? So it means that Wnt has to undergo this modification in the Golgi apparatus before it can bind.
Okay, yeah, of course. That makes sense. I think it's just that I didn't even know what palmitylation means. But it's just something that you have to like know, right? That palmitylation is one of the post-translational modifications.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to know it in detail. You can just know, like, just be able to recognize that it is a post-translational modification. And then, like, even if you don't know what palmitylation is, you can see, like, it's like adding something to a protein that's already transcribed. Like, Wnt is a complete protein, and then we're just adding something to it. So you can also just break it down into, like, simpler terms like that, and that's good enough.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then question 2 asks, based on the passage, which stage of embryonic development do Wnt proteins initiate? Which one did you guys pick for this?
I picked C.
Perfect. So that's correct. We're looking in paragraph 2 where it's talking about the different functions. So the only, you can literally just match up the words, right? So the question asks for embryonic development, and then you can look in the first sentence of paragraph 2, which says one of the functions of Wnt is embryonic germ cell induction. And so you just have to know that germ cells are induced in the gastrulation phase of embryonic development. So perfect. And then third question, according to the passage, information in the passage, which of the following molecules is classified as a transcription factor? So which one did you guys pick for this, and which paragraph would you be looking at?
Okay, so at first I picked beta-catenin because I was looking at the fourth paragraph where it says, at the end of the paragraph where it says beta-catenin is able to complex with LEF, TCF in the nucleus, enhancing the transcription. So I like thought that, okay, it's going to be able to enhance the transcription. But I think the reason why I got it wrong is because beta-catenin is not the same as like the B-catenin?
No, so it's actually the same thing. I picked beta-catenin as well because in the last sentence of the passage, it says beta-catenin is able to complex with LEF and TCF in the nucleus, enhancing the transcription of the genes. So they are the same thing. That's not the reason why you got it wrong, I think. I think this sentence makes it seem like beta-catenin is the thing that is acting as a transcription factor. But the tricky part was like you had to look at the actual, let me go back to the passage image. So if you look on the right side of this image, it's not beta-catenin. So like this line right here is like your nucleic acid DNA that you enhance or like silence to change transcription of genes. So beta-catenin isn't the thing that's actually binding DNA and acting as a transcription factor. It's the LEF TCF complex. So that was the reason why it was LEF, not beta-catenin.
Okay. Is it because the beta-catenin is like not already present in the nucleus?
Oh no, so it's what's happening is that beta-catenin forming a complex with LEF TCF is what allows LEF TCF to act as a transcription factor. But so beta-catenin is helping LEF be a transcription factor rather than beta-catenin entering the nucleus and being a transcription factor itself. So they can be, actually don't know. I think I'm not sure if transcription factors always have to start off in the nucleus, but in this case, that's not what you would need to worry about. It's the fact that beta-catenin isn't the direct transcriptional factor because it's not binding the DNA directly.
Oh, I see. Okay. So would you like recommend like for this question to have also taken the image into consideration?
Right, yeah, because I think the actual sentence is a bit misleading.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so same thing. It's not beta-catenin isn't the thing that actually has a DNA binding domain, so it's not actually binding the DNA itself. And then question 4, which modification would likely occur to beta-catenin in the absence of Wnt signaling? So if it's the absence, we know we're looking on the left side of the figure, but the figure to actually, yeah, actually the figure, you can either look at the figure or the image or the passage description. So which one did you guys pick for this one?
The reason why I got this wrong is because I didn't know the definition of the correct answer, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, it makes sense now that I do.
Right. Great. Yeah. Sometimes you'll just come across things that are like seems like extra detailed. I wouldn't worry about like not knowing it before. Just make sure you make a flashcard or something so that you wouldn't get wrong the next time. So ubiquitination is one of those post-translational modification that has a specific purpose. Like it marks things for degradation. So you just have to be able to match that. In the absence of Wnt, beta-catenin is degraded, and then you have to know degraded matches up with a post-translational modification of ubiquitination. Number 5, which residue change the transmembrane region of frizzled would result in the greatest decrease to the entropy of the system? Which one did you guys go for this?
I said C.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So this one I think was actually a bit confusing to me because you said it felt like so threonine is unfavorable in the transmembrane region because you don't want a polar thing in the non-polar region. But the way they explain it is that if you have something that's unfavorable in that region, then you actually have to create order to like cause stability. So if you think about like having a non-polar molecule in water, you have to form like a ring around it called like a hydrophilic pocket or something to like make sure the hydrophobic stuff stays dissolved. So it's like kind of that same concept. If you're making like a structure like a pocket, that's increasing order, which is decreasing entropy. So I think that's a bit unintuitive, but that's how changing from a favorable amino acid to an unfavorable one actually decreases entropy. Is that okay? Is that still confusing? Because that definitely got me at first.
Yeah. So just to clarify, like when you make unfavorable amino acid substitutions, it
Mhm.
leads to more disorder. So then in turn, it leads to a decrease to the entropy.
So more it leads. Sorry, did you say more disorder or more order?
Yeah, like unfavorable leads to more disorder.
Okay, yeah. So it's actually not that. So when you make the substitution, you need to find a way to create stability. So like it's not that making the substitution itself is increasing disorder, it's that the effort needed to create stability to keep that unfavorable amino acid dissolved requires adding more order. So it's actually that when you make an unfavorable substitution, you're increasing order. Or like, not that you're increasing, it's like you need to increase order in order for that unfavorable amino acid to sit comfortably in an unfavorable environment.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then why would it like result in decrease to the entropy basically?
Because entropy is a measure of disorder. So if you're increasing order, you're decreasing disorder.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then last question. Based on the passage, which structure is added to Wnt in order to bind Wintless? So we're going back up to the first paragraph. Did you get this one?
Yeah, I got this one right.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's just about knowing fatty acid nomenclature. So, well, I guess like the first thing is go back up to the first paragraph, see that the structure you're adding to Wnt is that monounsaturated 16 carba omega 7 fatty acid. So if it's a fatty acid, it's going to have that carboxylic head in a nonpolar chain, which is all of them, so that doesn't help. You know it needs 16 carbons, so you would cross off D. It's monounsaturated, which means it only has one double bond, so then that gets rid of everything else but A. So that was it for this passage. Are you guys good to move on to the live passages?
Yeah.
Back to you, right, Sim?
Yep, I just sent the passage in the link in the chat. So we'll give you guys around 20 minutes to do those and then we'll go over it.
Yeah, you can also just put done in the chat once you're done reading. If you finish early, we can just start.
Okay, is it just the one passage?
Oh, sorry, let me put in the, or sorry, Sim, how do you do it? Do you have them read both of the passage at once?
Yeah, I just sent them both.
Okay.
Do you have your link? Or I found it if you want me to send it.
I got it. So I just sent the psych social one as well. So you're doing one chem phys and one psych social.
Hey guys, I'm gonna go over the Oreo passage just for the sake of time now. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, cool. So we have a reaction here, and we're using amino acids and heavy metals as the catalyst, and then we're synthesizing compound 1 and then 2, and then we have compound 3 and then 4. And then we also have this table letting us know how much was the yield of the products. So I'm going to go over these quickly just for the sake of time, but please stop me if you have any questions, okay? So for the MO atom with the complex with lysine, what is it classified as? So you should know the definitions of all of these, and looking at the structure, lysine is neutral based off the passage. So it is the MO that is positively charged, and that means it can accept electrons. So that means that is a Lewis acid because they accept electrons, and a Lewis base donates electrons, and that would be lysine. Amphipathic means it can be both hydrophobic and hydrophilic. And amphiprotic is that it can act as both the acid and a base. So Lewis acid is the best answer here. Yes, so we look at the complex charge, and this would be the complex if you drew it out. But basically, yes, the charge, and it tells you in the passage that lysine is neutrally charged, so you know that that's not the one with the charge. Does that make sense? Okay. For question 2, you just really need to know the IR spectrum and what the peaks are at. So for that, you should definitely know the IR values of these few molecules. And so the ketone is going to be at around 1750, which is in that range of 3. So you can cross off A and B because they don't have 3 in it. And then you also need to know that the second value is going to be that CH stretch. So that's going to be around that, it's going to be less than 3,000. So that's going to be around 2. So you need to have 2 and 3 in those. And that's just knowing your IR values. So make sure you make some flashcards about those and have those down. Okay, what is the electronic configuration? And then this we know because you just look at the periodic table and you see that there is a +2 charge, so you take away those 2 atoms, or 2 electrons, I mean. So the 2 electrons are lost, and then that leaves us with 4d4. Are you asking about question 3? Yes. Between A or C. Because the molecules are lost, one is going to be from the 5s molecule. Does that make sense? Because on the periodic table, it is 4, sorry. Where are we? Okay, so this is the electronic configuration. You're going to first lose it from the S subshell, and then you lose it from the D subshell. And that leaves us with 44. Does that make sense? Okay. So which is true regarding compound 2 and compound 4? So for this, you want to go back to the passage and read at which temperature were we making the products at. So compound 4, I think, was with the lower temperature. So that means it's going to have that's going to be the kinetic product made at the lower temperature, and those have lower activation energies. So you really want to know what the difference is between kinetic and thermodynamic. Thermodynamic is more stable, but it does have higher activation energy, and it is going to be more stable at the higher temperature. Make sense? Okay, question 5. So the structure of reagent 1 contains which functional group? So again, you look at the figure, and looking at this figure, you see that there's 3 carbons, and that's going to be your tert-butyl. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a question. Like the reason why I didn't pick that one is because I thought that T-butyl doesn't count as a functional group, but like it would count.
Yes. I guess in the question it says which of the following functional groups, so it's telling you that these are the choices that you can pick from as a functional group.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, I thought that was unusual too, but I wouldn't. It's just because
Yeah.
hydroxyl is definitely not it, and it's also not
Right.
an ether, so you kind of left with no choice.
Okay, so basically hydroxyl is basically like an OH with a C, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, where did question 6? Oh, shoot. Sorry, I didn't put question 6, I think, before. Hold up. Yeah, I think I did not put just the question alone. Sorry about that. But compound 4 is prepared from compound 3 by what? So first you look at the steps, and you would first make the peroxide, which is becoming reduced, okay? And then from there you make the alcohol, and that's becoming more oxidized. Does that make sense? As it's
Yeah,
oxidized to the ketone.
yeah, so basically like I don't know if my line of thinking was correct for this one, but because the OH like loses an H bond, it gets like oxidized. Is that like correct?
Yep, so it can be in terms of losing that H bond or gaining that oxygen, which
Okay.
is the same thing. Or you look at both. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And last question. So we have, this is looking at the table. So we have compound 2, and we're given 0.6 moles of compound 1. What's going to be the actual mass? And then we are given that is 100 grams per mole. So looking at the table, you know that there is around a 40% yield for compound 2 using the complex. And then we go from 40% yield, we have 6 moles, and then for every mole, we have 100 grams. And that's going to be around 24 grams. And since we rounded down, the best choice would be 25.
So in this case, like what's the actual value and then what's the theoretical value?
So the actual yield is going to be around 24 grams, and this is going to be, the percentage is going to be around 41% of that.
Okay, so then like what did you plug in for the theoretical?
40%.
Oh, I thought that was the percent yield.
Oh, sorry, hold up. Yeah, so that's the percent yield. The theoretical yield is going to be, hold up, I'm not sure if we used that here.
Okay.
The theoretical yield, because you have the theoretical moles, the theoretical yield in mass is moles times molar mass.
Oh, so for the theoretical, you use the 0.6 moles, but then the actual, you're just finding that out.
Yeah, so you're solving for the actual yield using your percent yield. And then before you do that, you also need to get your theoretical yield in grams, because currently you're given that you have 0.6 moles of compound 1. So if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you're going to also have 0.6 moles of compound 2. And then you need to convert that moles to mass to get your theoretical yield.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yep, so that would be right here. The 0.6 into 100. Okay.
Did
Does
you guys,
anyone have any questions before I pass it off to Pranava?
and then did you guys get a chance to read this yet, or you need more time?
I'm currently like on the second question, but
Okay.
like,
We can just do the questions together as long as you guys read the passage, because we're also over time, so I don't want to like have you guys stay too long after. Is that okay?
yeah.
Great. Okay. So you guys just read the passage just now. I'll pass on summarizing it. So the first question says, which of the following experimental results would validate the response of interviewee 1? So you guys pick any answer for this one. So interviewee 1 says, I feel uneasy going to a doctor's office, especially if the staff at the clinic are of a different background to myself. Very often there's a language barrier and I feel I have no choice in the treatment I'm given. So that person is saying that if there is someone from a different background, she feels that she gets worse treatment. So there's a little bit of a stretch from what the passage says in the question, but you're just asked to choose the closest answer. So if we went through the choices one by one, so demographic discordant would be the one where you have a different background, leads to reduced mortality. So this is probably incorrect, because if the person says they don't like going to a doctor's office when they have demographic discordant relationships, then that would probably increase mortality. So we would eliminate A and keep B for now. And then C says the presence of a translator at a race concordant patient-physician meeting leads to reduced mortality. So this one was a little bit of a trap, because you think it would reduce the discordance, but it's actually a race concordant relationship. So it kind of, you don't even need the translator. So it's kind of like there's no difference between C and D, because the presence or absence of a translator shouldn't make a difference when you already have a concordant physician-patient meeting. So the only one that seems to make sense is that B, when you have demographic discordance, so when physicians and patients are from different backgrounds. Oh wait, sorry, I had that the other way around. So concordant should be good, and then discordant should be worse. So discordant should have increased mortality, and concordant should be reduced mortality. So it should be A. Sorry, that was confusing. Do you guys want me to repeat that? Or is it okay? Here's their explanation. So it's saying how there's mistrust and stigma. So demographic discordant relationship would have better healthcare outcomes. So decreased mortality is a good thing. So when you have concordance between physician and patients, that should help outcomes. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next one. Question 2, which methodology did researchers likely not use during their investigation of immigrant health outcomes? causal, correlational, observational, or ethnographic? Anyone have an answer for this one? Even if it's a guess, we can talk through it. Okay, D. So it's actually going to be A, because causal indicates that it's an experiment. So generally when it's involving people, you don't have experiments except in the case of like a clinical trial when you're trying out a new drug. So this is largely an observational research method, right? So you're just getting interviews, you're seeing, so that's C. Correlational would be like the correlation of race concordance to like health outcomes. And then, sorry, let me just check what means. And then ethnographic, that would be because you're looking at the culture between the physician and the individual. So, it's just like knowing that an ethnographic is relating to like the background and culture and race concordance, discordance that they're talking about. Is that okay now, Hannah?
Oh yeah, thank you. I just thought that like at first I thought ethnographic was like they're studying social interactions like between people, but like I think I just like overthink it.
Yeah, so physician and patient relationships are considered social relationships as well. So if, even in that way, that would be correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
2 more left. Which of the following best explains the response of interviewee 2? So interviewee 2 says, my doctor recommended that I change my diet and stop eating certain foods from my home country as it is bad for my gut health, but I can't do this because it's part of my identity. So is there a lack of ethnocentrism, presence of xenocentrism, a lack of cultural relativism, or presence of prejudice by the physician towards the patient? Which one would most fit the doctor not understanding the culture of the patient when giving suggestions? C. Yep. So C is correct. Ethnocentrism is like being hyper focused on your own culture. And then xenocentrism is a little bit unfamiliar to most of us, but it's like being interested in a different culture while not living in that culture. So the example that they have is like someone in the US adopting Japanese customs and dress, while ethnocentrism is really being not receptive to other cultures. And then cultural relativism is like being able to see other cultures and understand different people's backgrounds. So the doctor doesn't have this because he does not factor in the culture of the patient and how food is important to that when giving the suggestions of eating those. And D is incorrect because the doctor isn't prejudiced against the patient. He just doesn't understand the significance of the person's like cultural food. Okay, last one. A functionalist who supports the negative host selection theory would agree with which of the following statements? So the negative host selection was one of the reasons for explaining the immigrant health advantage. So negative host selection is that border medical examinations by immigration authorities in host countries result in screening out of less healthy immigrants. So is the latent function of a nation's health system increased immigrant health? The manifest function of host nation healthcare system decreased immigrant health? The latent function of negative host selection is discrimination against immigrants. Manifest function of negative host selection is discrimination. So manifest is a stated function, the original function, and then the latent is the unintended or underlying effect of the manifest function. Yeah, I think that was a bit trickier on this one. In terms of discrimination, they're talking about screening out of less healthy immigrants, right? In that way, it's discriminating against immigrants who are less healthy because you're not letting them come into the country. So that's what it's talking about for discrimination. So it's actually yeah, A and B are not correct because the host nation healthcare system isn't improving immigrant health, right? Because it's talking about how um, once those people are here for a while, the initial advantage deteriorates and then they become just as healthy as the native born population, so they're not healthier. So actually, host nation healthcare system are resulting in decreased immigrant health. So you can cross off A, but then B is wrong because that's not the manifest function, right? A country doesn't design its health system with the explicit purpose of worsening their immigrant health. So that's why B is wrong. And then the manifest function of negative host selection is to make sure your immigrants are vetted before they come here. So the latent function would be discrimination.
So I feel like for this question, the best way to approach it is like process of elimination, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's initially hard to make that connection between like how is this discrimination, but then if you start crossing the other choices off, you can maybe make that link easier. Yeah, so do you guys have any questions on this passage or any of the passages in general? Any comments or any feedback for us?
Yeah, I think this was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and participating. That was the end. So you guys are free to go unless you have any questions, and we can hang around until everyone leaves.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too, bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.